Welcome back. In this 8th episode of our South Australian Unsolved Murders and Missing Persons series, we take a look at the Mark Langley case, one of at least 5 young men believed to be the victims of Adelaide's infamous The Family, a pedophile ring who abducted, tortured, raped and murdered young men across the city in the 70s and 80s. The Robert Woodland case, a young man brutally beaten and left to die alone in Adelaide's South Parklands. But is this story linked to something much deeper and darker than originally thought? And finally, Christine Redford, whose family has waited 22 years for answers after she disappeared from her Kensington Gardens unit in 1998. 18-year-old Mark Langley was an athletic, good-looking young man who quickly endeared himself to others. He is also believed to be one of the victims of Adelaide's infamous The Family, a ring of pedophile sadists and murderers who have never been brought to justice. On Saturday, February 27, 1982, Mark attended a friend's 18th birthday party in Windsor Gardens, a suburb in northeastern Adelaide. He was with his family, who were also guests at the party, but he later left with a couple of friends, Ian and Ian's girlfriend, Paula, to hang out and cruise around the city. Ian would later recall that the trio were parked along War Memorial Drive, overlooking the Torrens River, when an argument cropped up over cigarettes. The argument went on for some minutes until Mark, needing to get away from his friends and clear his head, decided to get out of the car and walk away. Ian and Paula drove away, but returned just minutes later. Unfortunately, by that time, Mark was nowhere to be found. He had seemingly disappeared, and a brief search of the area failed to find him. Deciding Mark had likely hitched a ride with someone, his friends assumed that he would make it home. It wasn't until the next day, Sunday, February 28th, that Mark's parents grew concerned. They phoned police, hoping that their son's whereabouts was a simple case of miscommunication. Police reached out to all of Mark's known friends. No one had seen or heard from him. 9 days later, Mark Langley's body was discovered in the Adelaide foothills, close to Mount Lofty, in the area known as Summertown. He was found wearing most of the clothing he had last been seen in, minus an undershirt, and without the chains he often wore around his neck, which contained his zodiac sign, Cancer. Like other suspected victims of The Family, investigators would learn a lot from Mark's remains. He had been killed elsewhere and then transported to this location post-mortem, implying that the killer had a base of operations for his or her dark deeds. Also, like the other victims, Mark's cause of death seemed to be almost identical. Blood loss from an anal injury caused by the forced insertion of an unknown item. Mark's remains had also clearly been thoroughly washed before being dumped. Just like victim Alan Barnes, this bore signs of premeditation, implying that this wasn't an impulsive decision, but a conscious one by a killer afraid of being identified through forensic testing. Unlike the other murder victims, however, Mark's body showed an odd sign of a surgical procedure having been carried out. Examiners discovered that just a few inches above his groin and just below his navel, Mark had a small surgical scar that had been sealed shut with staples and a specific type of Johnson & Johnson surgical tape. The area around the scar had even been shaved away, implying that this was a methodical decision by someone with surgical experience. Medical examiners and investigators began to theorise about the reason for the surgery, and the most plausible explanation to date is perhaps one of the worst to imagine. This theory is that whatever item had been used to sexually assault Mark, which ultimately led to his death, had gotten caught up in his intestines and required surgery to retrieve. Hence the odd scar that seemed to serve no other purpose. Because Mark had been killed and his body dumped during the Australian summer months, his remains had already suffered serious decomposition. It has been reported that the exposed skin on his face and neck had begun to wither away, leading to the theory that he had been killed shortly after going missing. This meant that his remains had likely been sitting out in the wilderness for about a week, meaning he had been killed and his body dumped pretty quickly, certainly within a day or two. Medical examiners discovered the presence of drugs in his blood, including the chemical compound chloral hydrate, also found in the system of victim Alan Barnes. Alan also had an above-average level of alcohol in his system. Now, with Mark Langley, police were able to confirm the presence of another drug, mandrax, referred to as Randy Mandy among the era's deviants. Mandrax was a sedative that had just become popular worldwide under the branding Quaalude. This notoriety brought with it a poor reputation, and by the late 1970s, mandrax had become a regulated prescription drug throughout Australia. The emergence of this drug would prove to be very interesting in the years to come during the investigation of the murder of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin. Richard was last seen leaving a bus stop in June 1983. On July 24th, almost 2 months later, his body was discovered at Mount Crawford Forest, about 35 kilometres northeast of Adelaide. Like the other young victims, Richard had died as a result of blood loss caused by extensive anal injuries. Medical examiners discovered an insane mix of sedatives in his system, including Noctec, Mandrax, Valium, Rohypnol and Amatel. Unlike other drugs, by this time mandrax was heavily regulated, meaning police could search through government records to find out who had a prescription and whether or not they appeared on suspect lists. After the discovery of Richard Kelvin's body, one name popped out: Bevan Spencer von Einem. Following weeks of investigations, a search of von Einem's home, which he shared with his mother, not only uncovered many of the drugs found in the victim's systems, but forensic testing matched fibres found on Richard Kelvin's body to the carpet in von Einem's house. Von Einem was charged and ultimately convicted of Richard's abduction and murder, and sentenced to life with a 24-year non-parole period. He remains in prison today, housed at the Port Augusta jail, just 50 minutes from where I live. Police continued to mount a case against von Einem for the murders of Alan Barnes and Mark Langley, but with very little evidence, they feared he would be acquitted, meaning he could not face charges if new evidence became available in the future. The case was dropped. Police continue to believe that von Einem did not act alone, describing him as not having the intelligence or the physical strength to have carried out the murders by himself, and he certainly lacked the surgical skills that would have been necessary in the case of Mark Langley. However, von Einem has remained silent, and now, decades later, no one has ever been held accountable for the torture and murder of at least 5 young victims. While on the subject of Bevan von Einem, I came across a photo I've never seen before. It shows von Einem sipping champagne with then South Australian Premier Don Dunstan. At about 6:25 p.m. on the 8th of December 2004, 36-year-old Robert Mark Woodland was found by a member of the public in the South Parklands in the Adelaide City. His body was located approximately 50 metres west of Sir Lewis Cohen Drive. A post-mortem examination found that Mr. Woodland had been the victim of a serious assault that had taken place some days earlier at that location. Because the Parklands were a well-known beat for gay men looking to hook up, it was also a magnet for thugs and hooligans who would brag about their poofter-bashing exploits. It was natural to suspect that Mr. Woodland's murder was another gay-bashing and hate crime. His vehicle, a blue Commodore sedan, registration number SAWYZ 736, was located nearby in the car park of Veal Gardens. Police inquiries indicate that Mr. Woodland left his home at Plimpton Park in his vehicle at about 9 p.m. on Saturday the 4th of December 2004. He did not return home or attend work and was reported missing 2 days later on the 6th of December. Police believe that a member of the public saw Mr. Woodland in the early hours of Sunday morning on the 5th of December, and at that time he was alone and did not appear to be in distress. When Mr. Woodland's body was discovered, personal belongings including his keys, ANZ ATM card, RAA plastic sleeve and his jumper were missing. His cash card was later used in the Adelaide Central Business District. Police would also like to speak to the driver or occupants of a white dual cab utility which was parked on the western side of Sir Lewis Cohen Avenue on the morning of Sunday the 5th of December. In July of 2016, after advancements in science, staff from Forensic Science SA had potentially identified a DNA profile of a suspect, but there has been no match so far. While on the surface, Robert Woodland's death appears to be one of the many gay hate crimes and easy target robberies that occur in the Parklands, but a little research has uncovered that it may in fact be part of a much bigger problem, and the perpetrators far more dangerous than the hooligans who cruise the scene for their gay hate fix. It may be part of a story that includes Adelaide's infamous Mother Goose and a pedophile ring of high-profile professionals nicknamed the Family. Robert Woodland was allegedly a victim of institutional child sex abuse during the 1970s. Later, like so many other victims, he decided that if that was going to happen to him, it would be on his own terms and offer him some independence. He became what is known as a rent boy for older homosexuals and married men cruising under the darkness of night. When Peter Lewis, the independent Speaker of the South Australian Parliament, and a small team of committed campaigners fought to change the statute of limitations on child sex abuse cases, the victims came flooding through the Speaker's door. Among them were former male prostitutes who had plied their trade down at Veal Gardens and had stories about people in high places. One of them, according to Lewis, was Robert Woodland. Lewis recalls, "He was afraid for his life. He said there were people who didn't want him to talk about what he wanted to tell me. While there are no official records, the story that became public was that Robert Woodland, along with two others, alleged that while underage they performed sexual acts for two MPs, one of whom was still serving in 2002, a judge and a prominent policeman. According to Lewis and his team, two female social workers had independently already come forward claiming knowledge of the same allegations against the same people. In a partial victory on December 3, 2004, former Supreme Court Judge Ted Mulligan was appointed to head a commission of inquiry into the abuse of children in state care. Peter Lewis had wanted something more wide-ranging, but it was a start. The very next night, Robert Woodland went to Field Gardens, where he was seen by an acquaintance at about 1 a.m. on Sunday, December 5th. He was never seen alive again. Peter Lewis recalls, Woodland's body was found on the Wednesday. It was before lunch that I was told, and it made me sick. I'm not often made sick, but it was because he'd been afraid of that happening to him. This is an intriguing story, and one which I might upload a separate video on in the near future. Basically, having formed a strong distrust in police to investigate these allegations, Peter Lewis refused to hand over documents and an alleged videotape, which led to him being forced to resign as Speaker. Within 3 months, 2 more men who had spoken to Peter Lewis's team were also found dead. Christine Redford was last seen at her Kensington Gardens unit in Adelaide on Tuesday the 23rd of June 1998. Then 47 years old, Christine lived alone and did not drive, but had a wide circle of friends through her job as a grief counsellor and voluntary work with the Salvation Army. Christine kept things in order, apparent from the neatness of her home unit. There had been no indication of trouble when she spoke to a friend on the phone on June 30th. 5 days later, the friend reported her missing when her mailbox was overflowing and the message bank on her telephone was almost full. She was gone, but her handbag and personal effects were left behind. Only her keys were missing. Her bank accounts were untouched, and passport checks showed she had not left the country. Her sister, Carol Redford, said Christine's life had changed dramatically in early 1998. She used to keep daily journals, but something happened in January. The journal stopped, Carol said. She dropped a group of friends, found a new group, found a new church. It wasn't unusual for her to get a new group of friends because she moved through phases. But there were people in her life, so someone must know what happened. Christine had a sister and mother in Adelaide, another sister in Perth, and a brother in New Zealand, but has made no attempt to contact them. A woman who spent her time comforting and helping others had vanished, and her disappearance was categorised as a major crime, with fears she had been murdered. 9 years later, in 2007, the Missing Persons Unit was tasked with reinvestigating the case. Senior Constable Robin Ferraro revisited Christine's sister, Carol.
In particular, her younger sister, Carol, and perhaps prompt some memories from her that we can elicit some information from. There's lots of questions that I'll be asking today, but principally I think the most important one would be what her theory would be on Christine's disappearance. Lovely. Thank
9 years ago, when police told Carol her sister was missing, she just thought she'd gone on a trip.
I think probably initially we just thought, oh, well, she'll be back soon, you know. they'll find her in Sydney and having a holiday, or she'll be at a conference somewhere. I think probably where it really came to pass that, you know, she'd gone when we were cleaning a flat out. And I said to the friend who was helping me, I said, you know what's going to happen? She's going to walk in this door any minute now and say, what the hell do you think you're doing with my stuff? No. You know? And he just laughed about it. Of course, that never happened. But you just sort of have those moments where you just wait and think, well, and she'll walk in and you'll get this, what are you doing?
And years later, those thoughts still haunt Carol, especially her memory of their last time together.
But yeah, Chris and I had an argument. And then I took her home, and that, like so common, was the last time.
Remember when that would have been, the last time she went to Perth?
1993.
Can you recall at all anyone that might know about what's happened? We're absolutely open for any new information that comes through.
After visiting Carol, Officer Ferraro receives an unexpected call from Christine's ex-boyfriend, who gives her new information about the night Christine disappeared.
How would you say her mental state was that night?
Maybe agitated, I suppose you could say, confused maybe.
This wasn't normal for her to be like this.
Well, she sometimes used to get like that. You know?
And as he's talking, the boyfriend remembers a masseuse, an acquaintance of Christine's police have never interviewed.
A lady across the road, she used to get massages from on McGill Road somewhere. That's about it really that I can think of.
A hot new lead, 9 years old.
It's very important to keep an open mind. There's certainly no evidence to suggest that she's been met with foul play. There is a possibility that she may have left to create a new life for herself, try and identify who this woman was, see if she has any information on Christine prior to her disappearing.
Acting on the new tip, Robin checks houses in the street where Christine's masseuse may have worked.
Just making some inquiries in relation to the disappearance of Christine Redford 9 years ago. You've lived in the area for some time?
A long time, yeah.
Would you know of anyone that conducts massages?
No, I wouldn't.
No? A female that conducts massages? No, I don't. No? You might recognise her from this photo.
No.
I can only think of one lady that was in that sort of work at the time, and I can get her details for you if you like.
Oh, true. What was she doing, practising massage?
She was working up the road, and she would probably have been one of the only massage people at the time. Certainly if you're talking about 9 years ago.
Yes.
Robin's cold case is warming up. She now has a name and address for the masseuse.
That's terrific. So I'm just going to follow up with this woman at the Campbelltown address and hopefully see what she has to say might be of interest to the case. Lovely to meet you. So your two photos. Like, this is 9 years ago, so obviously that's how she was looking around about that time. I think you would recognise her or know of her because she was apparently very bubbly, friendly.
Right.
You don't recognise?
Sorry, I can't help you today.
No, well, appreciate your
Heather
time.
is a masseuse, but not the one they're looking for.
Next, Ferraro arranges to meet the woman who reported Christine as missing, her best friend, Carmel White.
She may be able to remember something about Christine and prior to her disappearance that she's gotten to tell us about in the past and help us get some further information for this investigation.
I'd just come out of hospital and she just seemed a little bit disappointed that she couldn't talk to me at the time.
Okay.
And when I rang her in a couple of days' time, there's just nothing happened. She didn't answer the phone, and then a week had gone by, and that's when I started to get really concerned and expressed that to the police department. I just can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt her because, like I said, she was a very open, very kind, very loving person, very empathetic towards people's needs.
What's your feelings on the theory that she's gone away to perhaps create a new life for herself?
See, that just doesn't seem possible to me.
No.
It's not, like I said, it's out of character for her. She's not that type of person.
Okay.
She would let somebody know. She simply would let somebody know.
And,
Excuse me. That wasn't supposed to happen.
No, don't apologise.
I'd just like to appeal to Chris, if you're out there, people care about you and love you and just want to know where you are. So if you could contact us, that would be great.
With no new clues, Robin decides her last chance may lie in a statewide media campaign. A forensic specialist has digitally aged Christine's photograph, showing how she may look at the age of 57. Robin contacts the Advertiser newspaper.
How would you feel about perhaps getting the image put in the paper again?
Oh, absolutely. We can push it along with something new.
Terrific.
But it would be another year before any new leads would come through. Then Constable Adam Marsh receives a bombshell tip from Crime Stoppers. A caller claims to have seen Christine Redford, alive and well, and living in Sydney.
I believe you may have some information that could assist us.
Yeah, I can't give you a lot of information on it, but the photograph is very similar to this woman who came to DY RSL between 8 to 10 years ago.
Okay.
Her hair's very similar to that photograph, and the sister who was on television, her mouth features are very similar to hers. She's always well dressed. She's probably about 57.
Has she ever mentioned where she's come from?
No.
No?
Look, she doesn't really tell anyone anything.
Do you happen to know where she lives?
Yeah, she lives at DY. The front unit on the northern side in the middle. There's 6 units at the front, and because I've seen her on the veranda.
And you still see her, like, recently?
Oh, yeah. Every time I go down there, she's there.
Okay, and she's a member of the club, do you know?
Yes, she is.
Okay. And we received some information just recently through Crime Stoppers on a possible sighting of her in Sydney. She is a regular at a local RSL club, but if you could just attend the address and speak to the person there and see if it is Christine Redford.
So the cops at DY head out.
We're off to DY RSL. Our informant has given us information that Christine frequents that location. We certainly want to speak to the manager and perhaps a couple of staff members. So we'll head there now and see what we can see.
Hi, how you going? G'day.
We're just making some inquiries about a missing person.
Right.
There is some information that's come to us in regards to maybe her being here.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if you have seen this lady. Now, does that ring any bells for either of you?
Certainly not to me, no. We've got 32,000 members, not counting the visitors, so it's
a big ask.
No, it doesn't look...
I do have a couple of copies of these photos. Would you mind very much if I left them with you and your staff to have a look at?
Yeah, anything we can do to help.
All right, thanks a lot.
No problem at all. Thanks for your time. Okay, bye.
No luck yet, so they now head off to the unit where Christine might be living.
How are you going? My name's Rosalie, this is Lex. We're just making some inquiries into a missing person by the name of Christine.
Police are face to face with the woman who could be Christine Redford.
Can I just ask how long you've been here?
4 years in December.
Right. Do you live here by yourself?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Christine.
Your name's Christine too. It strikes me that you look very much like her. Very much, yeah. Do you have a twin sister at all? You look very much like the lady that's gone missing. There's nothing wrong with going missing. It's not an offence to do so, but it's just that people are worried about this missing person.
How old is the missing person?
Excuse me?
How old is the person?
Probably early 50s.
Very strange.
Yeah.
It sure is.
Can I ask if you've got any identification at all?
Okay, can you just hold on?
Yes, of course. Thanks very much.
Because this Christine looks so much like Christine Redford, police need to check every detail.
Have you just changed your name at all, like in the last 4 years, or have you...
I'm not Camilla now. You're not talking to... I've been here for 4 years.
You're a Sydney girl, are you?
Yeah.
Born and bred?
Oh, definitely. I've got a brother that lives at Roseville. I bring him up every Sunday.
Okay. You know, obviously you have... There are similarities.
All right.
Probably not as striking as I first thought, but there are similarities. But we have to, you know, we have to go down
That's right. I was just surprised. I thought, what on earth have I done?
No.
Trying to be a law-abiding citizen.
Sadly, it's a dead end. But Christine's sister, Carol, says she'll never give up.
If anybody out there has seen Christine or knows anything of what might have happened with her all those years ago, we'd really love to hear something, anything, even if it's just where she is now. If you could contact your local police with any information, anything at all would be really good. Thank you.
If you or someone you know has any information, no matter how small, in any of these cases, please contact Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous. Spare a thought for the hundreds of families who continue to wait for answers and closure.
Murder.
It's the most serious crime.
How would you feel if your friend or relative was a victim?
And the case remained unsolved.
No clues, no goodbyes, and sometimes no body.
While the killer continues to live their life.
Never charged, never held accountable.
You would feel angry, helpless and frustrated.
You'd want justice.
You can help.
If you have any information,
no matter how minor,
ring Crime Stoppers.
See a lawyer.
There's significant rewards on offer.
Please end the silence.
Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more murder, mystery and mayhem. Until next time.